And I suppose, like, I live in Sligo, and I know that there's a big push in the different developments of the Sligo, Leitrim and the Northern Counties Greenway. I'm, as a cyclist myself, I suppose I remember Sligo cycling campaign, so I'd be very much in favour of that. Greenways are not just left on their own, that they're part of an active travel. You know, I suppose that rather than having them stuck out in the middle of nowhere, that they're able to be going in front of schools, and no one can deny that. But what's raised to me, I suppose, and I totally get your concerns, you know, that, and farmers have raised with me locally that and maybe I'm wrong now saying this about registration of land, that particularly that if land isn't registered in their names, that they're concerned about compensation around that. Am I right thinking that? And I'd love to just find out more about that. Is that something that can be overcome?
I suppose if they don't own it, they can't get paid for it. If it's not registered to them, they can't prove they own it. So how are they going to pay? Is anybody going to pay them?
Yeah, and I suppose that is an issue because and maybe that people have registered their land, but they're still not. It's not being put into their own ownership either. It's taken too long. That process is taking too long.
And that's why we see it. Before 2011, it wasn't compulsory to go to the land registry on conveyance of land. You went to the registry of deeds. So if land changed hands prior to 2011, it might not be on the registry of deeds, so they have to do a deed search to make sure they have it, which we all had to do.
Yeah, and so it's still in public ownership then, I suppose. It's still...
No, it's not. You could still own it, but it mightn't be marked on the land registry. It might be registered.
So that's something that needs to be addressed, I suppose, in the first place. Which would, and I've no doubt that everyone wants to see, from a health, I suppose, perspective as well, like I know our ageing population is ageing, and you know, like we need to get healthier as a nation. We need to get healthier, and it's trying to come up with the best possible way to work. And I suppose that's what these committees are for, you know. But and I suppose I would recognise that Greenways out beside public roads, or you know, new roads, that it kind of nearly goes against the grain of what Greenways are supposed to be. That they're, you know, so it's a very difficult.
Well, the definition is walking, wheeling, cycling in a recreational area. These are not zoos. They're not public parks. They're working farms. They're not recreational areas. So that's TII's own definition of a greenway. Like,
and compulsory purchase orders, I suppose, are the last resort, aren't they? That they are. It's the most expensive option as well.
But anyone that has left them in is now CPO'd. Anyone left them in to do any investigations, they were working on permissive access or whatever. Kerry, Mayo, Achill, Connemara, they were working on permissive access. As soon as they got planning, they CPO'd them. So we don't trust them. We're not leaving them in. They're coming in. They're not coming into any of our properties unless they engage with us properly, and before they put anything out in the public realm.
And that is the big message, that there's not proper engagement, is the right
Yeah.
No. Anyone else like to express?
I might just come in. I think that the issue is that there needs to be a review of the CPOs on the greenways, because it seems to be the default position. Rather than going through the proper steps and the guide and the code and having the engagement, it seems to be the default that is being there, which is stopping engagement, or proper engagement with communities and meaningful engagement. And I think it was a good point made, we were discussing it before we came in here, is that the farmers involved aren't public. They are actually directly involved in the process. So I think the issue here is that the default seems to be, if we don't get agreement, we're going straight to the CPO. So I think it's the CPO and Greenways and those type of projects that needs to be reviewed and considered by this committee.
Great, thank you. Gavin, would you know, I suppose you're the. I know that I've cycled on the Greenway down in your area, and it's wonderful. But I suppose Greenway isn't the answer to all active travel, in my opinion. That it should be linking up with routes.
Thank you. I have to be very strict with time.
It is very clear that everyone is in favour of Greenways, but there is definitely a blockage which has occurred. And I suppose from Sligo, I know, like, I'm in Sligo, and there was. I'd like to first find out about, there was a consultation process that happened about the Balahi, Collooney. I mean, that was assumed it was going to be, there was 3 stages of that it was going to be used as a greenway. And then we came back, there was only one owner, I suppose, it was Irish Rail. So I'd like to know how much that cost, all those stages cost, and now it's just left. Where is the stage of the project now? Is it going back to phase 1? It still says on the website it's at phase 2, when we know now that it's actually only going to be used for rail and it's going to be retained as rail. So to me that seems like a savage waste of money, you know, that I was allowed to go that far. And also I suppose I'd like to know that was a consultation with just one entity. How it seems that there is a disconnect between consultations with landowners, and I've represented someone myself who had concerns that the Greenway was going to, the SLN R1 was going to go through their land. I raised representation and they still haven't heard anything back about it. You know, they were raising concerns, it was actually going through their garden. And again, they're very much in favour of having a Greenway. They see the benefits of having a Greenway. And I suppose I'd like to see too about when the annual report is going, our annual review is going to be published this year, because we're coming to the end of the year. And also, is it private consultants rather than local authorities that are actually doing these consultations? And would it be an idea, should it be, to have a uniform approach that it's all based across local authorities, that it's going to be actually employees of the local authorities rather than private consultants? I'm not sure, is it private consultants coming in, or is it actually people employed by the local authority?
I was just going to say it's both. It's both. There is private consultants, but there's also they're steered by the local authority, and there is a liaison person to be appointed for each Greenway in the local authority. So it's a combination, but the amount of detail and the technical is generally provided by consultants.
Okay. And maybe that's an issue, you know, that could be looked at, that if it's a private consulting company, that maybe more oversight should be within the local authority or from yourselves.
Well, look, I mean, as I said, local authority is ultimately responsible as the sponsoring authority, but I think, you know, you only had to listen to your guests earlier at this committee talking about the CEO of Waterford City Council and their direct involvement to try and ensure community support. So I would agree with that. And I think to go to your point about railway lines and so on, we obviously have successful greenways that we can point to now that we're using unused railway lines. There clearly is significant investment going into both existing rail line services and expansion.
Thank you.
So anything that's earmarked in the All Ireland strategy would be reserved.
Senator Mark Duffy.
Rail.